Hey, so as I promised, this is the top three, which is a bit special today because it's a top three in, I would say, no specific order. It is just three numbers, which are then something I'd like to discuss with you. And you'll see that it's interesting because, again, people will think it's rigged, but it's not.
Definitely not.
So it goes in the same direction than what we were debating right now. So my first number is actually 1 versus 5. And that 1 versus 5 is the ratio that the non-profit organization Dig Deep has been showing to be the return rate of $1 you invest into water. Someone has no access to water. You bring that someone water and you win back $5. Why is that number interesting? Because it's not the first time there's a figure. There have been 1-to-3 ratios which have been given by water.org. Global Water Intelligence has made several studies to show that it's profitable, generally speaking, to invest in people having water. But I'm just taking this 1-to-5 because it's pretty spectacular and it tells a story which is bringing water to people is not a charity move. Bringing water to people is a very clever economic move. And once you get that lens, then it's a matter of how do you find the best shape to collect that profit. Because as a society, we have to collect that profit. Because right now, our utility approach is that the utility is bringing the water to people and charging for the water. But if the people don't go to the hospital, if the people don't need to lose so much school time and so far and so on, the utility doesn't get a cent back from that money, which is what economists called the wrong pockets problem or wrong pockets dilemma. So I'm not going into all the details of that, but what I'm trying to hint at here is that maybe there's a different way to deal with water where the people which are investing into that water, the one which are bringing that $1, get a better share of the $5 feedback. And that is then a strong incentive to do better.
Okay, two questions. First of all, I mean, the 1-to-5 or 1-to-3, whatever the ratio is, I mean, both are very positive, right? So the question is really, is it also for the industrial countries or is it just for the country which needs to get developed?
1-to-5 is a study from the US in the US.
In the US, so
Yes.
that means, okay. But
1-to-3 is more generally water.org was looking at the entire world and GWI was just saying it's cash positive wherever you are in the world.
Pretty interesting. I mean, the other point is, I mean, you said, let's say the water utilities get their water just by the tariffs, which is somehow right, because you have also the case, for instance, in Germany, the part of your tax going to the local community and they use this tax also to invest into the water utilities. So it's a, let's say, two-sided
act, yeah.
Whatever that is, right? That means there are two ways to get the money for the water utilities. So it's not only the 1.3 or the 1.5.
But this time looking at the revenue, not at the way they get the money, it's the way they get this $5 back. I mean, they have one-off costs, so they will charge the one plus some coping costs because you have some energy. So most of the time they will get 1.2 for one, which makes it quite hard to sustain the opening of new lines. Whereas if you get a share of the 5, that's a different story.
But let's say if the math is that easy, what is the issue? Why not investing? I mean, it takes a lot of money, but let's say if you get 1-to-5, let's say over the period of, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years after investment, it is normally a no-brainer. But the reality is different.
No, because the problem is, in what would you invest today? You would invest in a central utility, and by definition, because of this wrong pockets problem, the central utility cannot collect the 5. Because unless the central utility is really like North Korea, in which case everything goes under one hat, which is the state, then it is hard to have everybody having their pockets aligned. I mean, if all of a sudden I deliver good water quality to the people, which means they go less to the hospital is not going to pay me back because it doesn't need to have to have those people inside their beds. I'm coming back to that because...
So that means, but the revenue then is what? Is just based on tariffs or based also on better life, for instance, that I don't have to spend the money, for instance, at the hospital, that I can
the revenue is
work longer.
Exactly.
I mean, that is the other case, right?
You have more working hours, you have more people who are able to work, to go to studies, you have less people in the hospitals.
But then 1.5 is somehow weird from my perspective. Because who is getting the 5 back? The one who's investing the 1?
No, that's the wrong pockets problem. The people getting back the 5 are not the people investing the 1. That is the full dilemma. Unless we find a better way to do that. Okay. Which is going to be my third number. But before that, I have my second number. My second number is 44 million, and which comes with a second number, which is 2.2 million. Do you know what that refers to?
44 and 2.4.
2.2.
2.2. 2.2 access to water. That is somehow the
That
number.
has to do, but it's million, not billion, so it's not worldwide.
Okay.
Actually, 2.2 million people, it's the number of people in the United States.
You're talking
So
just about the
the
US.
richest country in the world who have zero access to water inside their homes or in their neighboring communities. So those are people who 100% rely on bottled water and trucked water for their living.
2.4
2.2 million
2.2 million
in the US alone. And those are people with no plumbing, no nothing inside the house, which means that there is no network existing, there is no connection existing, and so wherever you want to start,
is it households or what is that?
is people.
People. So what that means, the people who are living, let's say, for instance, in San Francisco on the streets, in the tent, they don't have any access to water.
Yes.
So they are counted.
That's the reason why the study says at least 2.2 million, because that is the one we know. But there are more people, which are living in the street, and that brings the numbers
But it's
higher.
not household. But let's say if you would tell me that 2.2 million households in the US are not having access to water, it is not the same.
It is not 2.2 million households just because there's more than one people in the household, but there are lots of households in those 2.2 million. For instance, if you are a Native American, you have 19 times more risk to have no water than if you're a white family.
Okay.
And if you're a Black or Latino, you have 2 to 3 times more chances, which is a terrible way to express it, to have no access to water than white. So there is a sociological aspect to that number. And of course, the Navajo Nation or the Appalachians Nation, those are the most impacted by this 2.2 million. But my other number is interesting as well. The 44 million, that's the number of Americans which are served by water, which has been breaching the Clean Water Act safety quality guidelines over the past 5 to 10 years. Which means a case like
once or twice or multiple times or
at least once. I mean, it can be the extreme case like Flint, Michigan, where we do know, but actually consider that 44 million, that's 15% of the population, again, in the richest country in the world, which are exposed to problem with water quality.
So you're wondering about that number, really?
I'm really wondering about that number, don't you?
No, not at all, because it happens all the time. It happens all the time. And they have to inform the people if that is really, let's say, if you have, for instance, take the stupid example, you have bacteria inside the water due to whatever, right? It can happen.
It should not.
Yeah, but it can happen.
But it should not.
It can happen, and it happens all the time.
But it should not.
I think a year ago was the last time that I have realized this in my hometown. I live somewhere in the middle of Germany, right?
So you bought the water in your hometown.
Exactly.
And you find it absolutely normal.
No, I didn't find it normal, but let's say that is the case why you have to live with that. Otherwise, what is the solution for that?
That's interesting. Maybe it's because you're German and you say the system is like that. Let's keep within the system. And I'm French and I'm more wanting to riot against it. But if I would have to boil my water, honestly, at some point I would say the system doesn't work.
Yeah, but the system works. But from time to time, it can happen that a failure occurs. I mean, think about that. I mean, the electricity goes off because there's a construction and one guy did a mistake. So would you say, well, the system failed? It's the same. It's the same.
It's a fully different story.
Wait. No, it's not. It's the same. If the construction on the network is ongoing and something happened with the pipe, they took a pipe which was contaminated. It was one person who did a failure, who installed this pipe. It was contaminated, and that's why that happened. So would you say that's
it's a fully different story.
Failed? No,
when electricity goes down,
but it's the same. Same story.
When electricity goes down, you want to put your light on, and there's no light.
Okay.
So there's no risk. When water is of bad quality, you don't know, you drink it. So you knew about it because they informed you. But how often does it happen and nobody informs you? And then you're drinking something which might be of bad quality. And what do we see?
Then we have a different, that's a totally different story.
Let's keep the US story. In California, 80% of people don't drink tap water. Why? Because they don't believe that tap water is of sufficient quality.
Exactly.
So that means that it's not 80% failure rate. Most of the time, and probably in California, even lower than the average in the full US, that water is of perfect quality, but people still go and invest into bottled water, which is 100 to 300 times more expensive. So that shows that we are not, as a sector, providing the right guarantees that when you're drinking from the tap, it's of the right quality. And that, to me, is a failure that we should be solving.
Okay, but let's say it is the same. It's the same. We are all humans. We all humans. Failure can happen. Someone pressed the wrong button and something happened. And it could affect that it goes into our network. It could affect that it is somewhere in the construction that someone dies because there was an accident because someone pressed the wrong button. We are all humans. It can happen. And take back the example. The most often reason why we have contamination in our network is because of construction work. They are going to the network. They have to exchange the pipes. You know, because you're a pipe guy. And you have to disinfect the pipe before going in, right? You have to do this with all the things. I mean, I did this at Akima, right? With the Googles. And if something goes wrong, you have a contamination. Then you flush it. Then you put chemicals into that. But something happened for whatever reason. It goes to the network and people get it out of the tap. It can happen, but it is a human failure. It is not a failure of a system.
Okay, first, if you do it right, that never happens. If you don't want to do it wrong, then come. I'll tell you how to do it right. I know the people who can train you. But that's just because.
That's it. Honestly,
no. But
honestly,
jokes aside,
that's a piping. It's not a piping.
I'm not
system.
saying that the system can never fail, and failure should always be allowed. I'm saying that if the system fails, you need to have a fail-safe protection, which is how do you prevent people from drinking water they should not be drinking. And so one way to do that might be to put a water tap, a water faucet, which just lights green when the water is good and red when the water is not good.
Yeah,
And a science fiction dream from...
And it doesn't work. It fails because someone... assembled it wrong. It is again a human failure.
If you let me finish my sentence, you understand that I'm saying that is something which has been dreamed by many and which is probably not the right solution. So I have another indicator, which is my third number, which just gives us a hint at what is really happening out there.
But the issue, I mean, you're addressing a right issue, but isn't the issue? I mean, what is the issue we have? It is about contamination, right? It is about contamination, and what harms us is bacteria contamination, or if we have virus in our water,
or lead, or heavy metals, or arsenic,
well, let's say, but 99% is about bacteria.
I wouldn't say 99%.
Okay, but let's say the majority. Okay, call it this way.
I'm not even sure about majority.
100%. But the issue there is that we still rely on tests, which take 3 days. That is an issue.
I did a plug for GF, so he's making a plug for Orb.
No. I mean, it's not for Orb. It's really talk about sensory. Really. I mean, go. If we want to know what is inside the water. So what does the waterwork do? What does waterwork does? It takes a sample, give it to the lab. I did this in my university time. It takes 3 days to get a result.
Absolutely.
And then I'm saying yes or no. But meanwhile, the water is already distributed. And that's why, the fire department is coming to my town and is saying, please boil your water. That's how it works.
And that is as well, you have in China a big market, like a multi-billion market for what they call secondary drinking water monitoring, which is basically whatever happens in the network. Okay, all good. We're not sure we trust about that.
We do it at home.
In the basement of the building, there is a sensor which is measuring, and then only maybe you do something. But all these buildings are equipping themselves with sensors in the basement to try to measure that.
It's the same. I had a call last week with a guy who wants to clean all the water from the tap, and I said, well, the market most probably is not here. The market is over there because. In Asia or in India, everybody has this reverse osmosis system.
And that brings me. Let me just give.
And that is a question. Is that really?
You don't
worse?
Want me to watch my third number, but exactly.
It is can we next episode? Can we have this as main section? That would be great.
Maybe. But my third number is exactly what you were saying. This under the sink, so point of entry or point of use. Treatments. What is the market for that? Do you have a feeling for that? Because honestly, I was feeling it's big, but I wasn't feeling it was that big. So how much would you say?
I can't give you a number, but let's say my feeling is that it is big in Europe, but even bigger outside Europe.
Actually, worldwide is $40 billion a year, the investment if those point of entry, point of use filters. And so the full question that tells is, does it still make sense? And see, that's the bridge with what we were discussing before. Does it still make sense to invest in large-scale utilities? Because a large-scale utility cannot benefit from the 1-to-5 ratio because wrong pockets, by design, they cannot take the 5. A large utility is not the right approach in places which right now are not in the network. Because if you already have existing networks and you need to add a new branch to that new branch will mean you need to redesign the full rest of the network, which means that the cost to connect the people who right now don't have any connection are much higher because you have to compound in all the other costs of whatever is happening in the system. And the third thing is, if you go for the central utility, you still have these billions going into a different solution because people don't really trust those utilities. So what if we say, all of a sudden, we fully change the role of the utility? The utility has no longer the duty to have these big pipe networks because pipes and pumps for utility represent 75% of their costs. So they don't have that anymore. Their duty is to help the people to have safe water at home. It might be by helping them to sensing that water, it might be to helping them set up this, but we really go for small scale treatments under the sink of point of entry, point of use. And if we do that, the people investing in that would be the households or the local communities. And the household and the local communities, they will benefit from the 5-to-1. Because they are the ones, if they invest $1 to have good water, they don't spend the other $3 to go to the hospital, and they can go to work because they are not sick, and they can send their people to school because they don't need to look for water, and they don't need any more to buy bottled water or trucked water, which we do know is hundreds times more expensive than that water they will have under the sink. So isn't that the new scale of the topic? Isn't that really trying to turn a big infrastructure industry into a distributed and decentralized, localized solution, which is still connected in a distributed and digital way to people who are the specialists and can be like the watchdogs?
Okay, let me be a little bit philosophical. What is the number one goal for each and every country? To keep the people healthy. Why? We need to ensure that they can go to work, that the GDP is going every year high. That is one of the goals. Nobody will talk about that, but it's one of the goals.
That is
right?
very German, but
yeah,
yes.
but it is. We have to ensure that you and you and you, that you all have to go to work because the company needs to create profit, that the GDPR for the entire country gets up. That is all about. So what you're saying right now is we should care about ourselves by implementing something under the thing to ensure that we are healthy. So the government will never play that game. Why? Because then it is on me to ensure that I stay healthy because of water. So, and if I'm not, let's say, I don't care or I don't invest so much because, then we have 10 solutions. One, let's say, a cheap one. Another one is a more expensive, right? And maybe I can afford just the middle. And I don't do the maintenance good enough and then I get sick. So what happened? I'm not able to invest into the GDP.
I raised that question to Seth Siegel when we had that discussion. And what he answered was 97% of humanity has smartphones.
True.
So it would be quite easy in this technological age to have smartphone alerts which tells you have been filling 200 pitchers of water. That's the limit for your filter. Exchange your filter. Or you haven't been doing your maintenance for 2 years. You should now do your maintenance.
I give you an example. I have two.
It's not from one day to the other.
No. I have two air filters in my home, and from time to time, this is. There are three filters in normal sieve. Then I have activated carbon, and I have this kind of against virus HEPA filter. And he told me recently, hey, you have to exchange the activated carbon filter. And I was thinking, damn, I haven't ordered this one. So what do? I press a button on the machine that I exchange that, and then he's running again. So and in the meantime, all I'm saying is I can come over that.
I'm just saying the system as we know it has failed. And
you are saying the utility system we have right now in place failed totally.
I'm not you're saying black and white. I'm saying it is not working the way it should be working. When you see that in our very developed countries, we don't have a 100% access to water for everybody. And I'm not speaking here of all the countries where water in the household is a dream, which they expect to come true since decades, and we keep failing them at not providing them with water. So when you see that, I do believe it's time to look for other solutions. But I'm still not fully convinced, honestly, with the point of views approach.
Me neither.
For the reasons you're mentioning. It has the beauty of the water fit for purpose, because that means you would have to just clean to the highest standards the water you drink. And then you wouldn't need to clean to high standards the water which used to flush the toilet. But it has the limit of what you said. You need to do your maintenance, and a filter itself might be doing more harm than good if you go over the lifetime of the filter. So it is tricky. I'm just putting those numbers here up for debate.
I think what we should have definitely is we should have the responsibility by the government to supply us with clean water standard. So that I can go to the tap, I can drink that, and I don't get sick. So that is the minimum requirement I have.
Which is not working.
Which is working. You drank that. Do you got sick? That was tap water.
I'm a firm believer of tap water.
Works.
I gave tap water to my daughters and my son in baby bottles. I'm a firm believer in the system.
So what?
But I'm saying that if you want to take the full people on board, the full population on board, including the ones which not like us, which are not water engineers, you need to bring them this additional level of safety.
Exactly not.
15% is not acceptable. It is 0% when it comes to health, or 0 point something.
First of all, as I said, is humanity. So that means failure can happen, right? It is a nightmare, but it can happen. But let's say to bring, something under the sink will not help to ensure that the people believe more in the water utility.
Then let's keep our pace.
No sense.
Let's keep our pace. And bottled water gets more investment than utility water, and everybody's fine with that. And then at one point, the utility is going to be in such a bad shape that we just have to avoid it. And then
that's exactly the pain point here. I discussed this in Valencia with a group of people during the VAX conference. So I discussed that. So what can we do to educate the people what water is about, how safe water is, what you can do with that? And that is the issue. We have to tell the people in the US, for instance, if 80% doesn't drink the tap water, well, then we have to tell them how safe the tap water is. And that is an education issue. It is not a technology issue, or that you have to change that to something under the sinks.
To me,
you don't get the trust.
It's a marketing battle, but here we are. If we go into that, we are opening a new tangent, which I'm really happy to have you do, but at another time, because I think we're running out of time. But really, we should have that conversation. But for now, what I wanted to highlight here is that it is interesting sometimes to just go outside the box and to say, look, that's the facts, and maybe we can keep doing what we've been always doing and just do it slightly better, and maybe it works, or maybe we can look at another side of the story and try a different approach. And I think that's somehow what we'll be discussing the deep dive. So to me, that was a smooth transition.
Yeah, but let's say I'm always going outside the box and you're always going against that. So think about you have to watch all the other episodes. We have recorded all. I'm always, guys, you know that, right?
The guy who said we need to go fully centralized in a full show is saying he's going outside the box. Come on.
I always bring new ideas to here. I'm always bringing new ideas, and you are, fighting against it. Anyway, whatever your opinion is,
that was a good joke. That was a very good joke.
Leave us a message in the chat. Tell us whether he is right, whether we should have something on the sink, or whether we should more invest into the utilities.
I never said that.
Everybody can drink the tap water, and I think that's the goal. I hope you're with me.
It's funny how you always transform whatever I'm saying, but